Black Waitress sat on Billionaire's lap to escape her ex. He whispered, "Play along, I'll protect you." What if a single moment of terror could lead to the most unexpected protection? Amelia wiped down the corner table at Rosewood Diner for the third time that evening, her hands trembling slightly as she glanced toward the entrance. The familiar knot in her stomach tightened when she spotted him through the rain-streaked window. Jerome, her ex-boyfriend, pacing outside like a predator waiting for the right moment to strike. She'd changed her phone number, moved apartments, even switched her work schedule, but somehow he always found her. The restraining order felt useless when fear lived in every shadow. As the dinner rush began to wind down, Amelia noticed the well-dressed man at table 12, expensive suit, kind eyes, completely absorbed in his laptop. She had no idea that this stranger would become her unexpected shield, or that her desperate choice in the next few minutes would change both their lives forever. "Where are you watching from tonight?" Amelia had been working at Rosewood Diner for 8 months, and it felt like home in ways her actual apartment never could. The regulars knew her coffee was always fresh, her smile genuine, and that she'd slip an extra piece of pie to anyone having a rough day. At 28, she'd learned to find joy in small kindnesses. Mrs. Patterson's stories about her grandchildren, the young couple who left heart-shaped napkin notes, the way the evening light filtered through the vintage windows. But tonight felt different. She'd caught Jerome following her to work twice this week, his angry texts flooding her phone despite the restraining order. The police had been sympathetic but clear, until he actually did something. Their hands were tied. "Stay vigilant," Officer Martinez had said, which felt like asking someone to hold their breath underwater. The man at table 12 intrigued her. He'd been coming in for a week now, always ordering the same thing: black coffee and apple pie, extra cinnamon. His name was Gabriel, she'd learned from his credit card, and there was something calming about his presence. He never demanded attention, never made her uncomfortable with inappropriate comments like some customers did. When she refilled his coffee, he'd look up from his work with a grateful nod that seemed to see her as a person, not just service. Gabriel owned 3 successful tech companies, though Amelia didn't know this. What she did know was that he treated everyone with the same quiet respect, from the busboy to the manager. She'd watched him help an elderly customer with directions, patiently drawing a map on a napkin. In a world that often felt harsh and demanding, his gentleness stood out like candlelight in darkness. The dinner crowd was thinning when Amelia saw Jerome push through the door. Her blood turned to ice water. He looked around the diner with that familiar angry determination, his jaw set in the way that meant trouble. She ducked behind the coffee machine, heart hammering against her ribs. The restraining order explicitly stated he couldn't come within 50 feet of her workplace, but Jerome had never cared much for rules. She watched him scan the room methodically, like a hunter tracking prey. His eyes landed on her for a split second before she could hide, and the cruel smile that spread across his face made her stomach lurch. He started walking toward the counter, ignoring the "please wait to be seated" sign, ignoring the manager's confused greeting. Amelia's mind raced through options. The back exit was blocked by a delivery truck. The restroom would trap her. Calling the police would take too long. Jerome was getting closer, and she could see that dangerous glint in his eyes. The same look he'd had the night she'd finally found the courage to leave him, when his fist had left bruises that took weeks to fade. She looked desperately around the diner, and her eyes landed on Gabriel. He was still absorbed in his laptop, completely unaware of the danger approaching. Without thinking, without any plan except pure instinct, Amelia made a decision that would surprise them both. Sometimes protection comes from the most unexpected places. Before rational thought could stop her, Amelia found herself walking quickly toward Gabriel's table. Jerome was closing in, his heavy footsteps echoing against the checkered linoleum. She could feel his presence like a storm cloud, dark and threatening. The few remaining customers seemed oblivious to the tension crackling through the air. "Excuse me," she whispered urgently to Gabriel, her voice barely audible above the diner's soft jazz music. He looked up, immediately noticing the fear in her eyes. Without explanation, Amelia did something that would have horrified her under any other circumstances. She sat down gently on the edge of his chair, her heart pounding so hard she was certain he could hear it. Gabriel's first instinct was confusion, but one look at her terrified expression told him everything he needed to know. He'd built his companies by reading people, by understanding unspoken communication, and right now every signal screamed that this woman was in serious trouble. "Play along," she breathed against his ear, her voice shaking. "Please. I'll explain later." Without missing a beat, Gabriel's business training kicked in. He'd negotiated million-dollar deals by staying calm under pressure, and this was no different. He gently placed his hand on her back, protective, not possessive, and looked up as Jerome approached their table. "Can I help you?" Gabriel's voice carried the quiet authority of someone accustomed to being in charge. His tone wasn't aggressive, but there was steel beneath the politeness. Jerome stopped short, clearly not expecting this scenario. His angry momentum faltered as he took in the sight before him. Amelia sitting comfortably with this well-dressed stranger who looked like he could buy and sell Jerome's entire world. "Amelia," Jerome's voice carried that familiar edge of barely controlled rage. "We need to talk." She pressed closer to Gabriel, drawing strength from his steady presence. "I don't have anything to say to you, Jerome. I thought the restraining order made that clear." Gabriel felt her trembling and his protective instincts flared. He'd grown up watching his father respect his mother, learning that real strength meant protecting those who needed it. This woman had trusted him with her safety, and he wouldn't let her down. "I think the lady asked you to leave," Gabriel said calmly, his hand remaining steady on her back. His voice carried no threat, just unwavering certainty. Jerome's face flushed red. "This is none of your business, man. Amelia, get up. Now." The diner had gone quiet. Other customers were starting to notice the confrontation, and Amelia could feel the weight of their stares. Mrs. Patterson clutched her purse closer, while the young couple from the corner booth watched with growing concern. "Actually," Gabriel continued, his voice never rising above conversational level, "any situation involving someone threatening my girlfriend becomes my business very quickly." The word girlfriend hung in the air between them like a shield. Jerome's eyes narrowed dangerously, and for a moment, Amelia thought he might explode into violence right there in front of everyone. But something in Gabriel's calm confidence seemed to give him pause. This wasn't the scenario Jerome had planned for, and suddenly he was the one who looked out of place. Jerome's hands clenched into fists, his face contorting with a kind of rage Amelia knew all too well. She'd seen this expression before, in her apartment when she'd told him she was leaving, in the parking lot when he'd cornered her after work, in the courthouse hallway when the judge had issued the restraining order. This was Jerome at his most dangerous, when his pride was wounded and his control was slipping. "Girlfriend." Jerome's voice dripped with disbelief and venom. "Amelia, what kind of game are you playing here?" He took another step closer, completely ignoring Gabriel's presence now. "You think you can just replace me with some rich boy? You think money changes who you really are?" Gabriel felt Amelia's whole body tense against him. Through her thin uniform, he could feel how she was fighting not to shake. It reminded him suddenly of his younger sister during thunderstorms, how she'd curl up small and try to disappear. The memory sparked something protective and fierce in his chest. "Sir," Gabriel said, standing slowly while keeping his arm around Amelia's waist, "I'm going to ask you nicely one more time to leave this restaurant. The lady doesn't want to talk to you." Jerome laughed, but there was no humor in it. "You don't know what you're getting into, rich boy. Amelia's got problems you can't solve with your credit card. Tell him, baby. Tell him about the real you." Amelia's breath caught in her throat. She could feel the familiar spiral of shame and self-doubt that Jerome always triggered. He had a gift for finding her deepest insecurities and twisting them into weapons. Even now, sitting next to someone who'd shown her more genuine kindness in 10 minutes than Jerome had in 2 years, she could feel those old doubts creeping back. "I work 3 jobs to pay for my mom's medical bills," she found herself whispering, as if confessing some terrible sin. "I dropped out of nursing school when she got sick. I live in a studio apartment with a broken air conditioner, and my car makes weird noises I can't afford to fix." Her voice was getting smaller with each word. "I'm not the kind of person who dates men in expensive suits. Gabriel looked down at her with such gentleness that it nearly broke her heart. The kind of person who works 3 jobs to take care of someone she loves? The kind of person who brings fresh coffee and extra cinnamon without being asked? The kind of person who faces whatever life throws at her with grace? He shook his head slightly. That sounds exactly like the kind of person I'd be honored to know. Jerome's face twisted with frustration. This is ridiculous. Amelia, we had something real. You can't just walk away from 2 years like they meant nothing. Have you ever faced something like this? Let us know in the comments. Amelia looked up at Jerome, really looked at him, and for the first time in months she saw him clearly. This man who had convinced her she was lucky he put up with her struggles, who had made her feel small and grateful for scraps of affection, who had turned love into fear. Standing next to Gabriel's quiet strength, Jerome looked exactly like what he was, a bully who had lost his power over her. 2 years, Amelia repeated softly, her voice growing steadier with each word. 2 years of you telling me I wasn't smart enough, pretty enough, successful enough. 2 years of walking on eggshells, of apologizing for things that weren't my fault. She stood up slowly, Gabriel's supportive presence giving her courage she'd forgotten she possessed. 2 years of believing that was the best I deserved. Jerome's confident mask began to slip. Baby, that's not. I was just trying to help you be better. You know I love you. Love. Amelia's voice carried a strength that surprised even her. Love doesn't leave bruises, Jerome. Love doesn't make you feel worthless. Love doesn't follow you to work and ignore restraining orders. The diner was completely silent now. Even the kitchen staff had stopped what they were doing to watch this moment unfold. Mrs. Patterson dabbed her eyes with a napkin, while the manager discreetly reached for the phone. Probably calling the police, Amelia realized with relief. Gabriel stepped slightly forward, not aggressively, but positioning himself between Amelia and Jerome. I think it's time for you to go, he said firmly. The ladies made her feelings clear, and you're trespassing. Jerome's desperation was showing now. Amelia, please. Don't throw away everything we built together for some stranger. You don't even know this guy. You're right, Amelia said, surprising everyone. I don't know him well. But in 10 minutes, he's shown me more respect than you did in 2 years. He didn't tell me what I was worth. He asked what I needed. He didn't make demands. He offered protection. She looked at Gabriel then, really looked at him, and saw something in his eyes that she'd almost forgotten existed. Kindness without conditions, strength without cruelty. Thank you, she whispered. Gabriel nodded. Thank you for trusting me. The police arrived just as Jerome was opening his mouth to argue further. Officer Martinez walked through the door, hand resting casually on her radio. We got a call about a restraining order violation? Jerome's face went pale. He looked around the diner at all the witnesses, at Gabriel's calm confidence, at Amelia's newfound strength, and finally seemed to understand that his power here was broken. This isn't over, he muttered, but it sounded hollow now, like an empty threat from a defeated opponent. Actually, Officer Martinez said, pulling out her handcuffs, it is. Violating a restraining order is a serious offense. You're under arrest. As Jerome was led away in handcuffs, Amelia felt something she hadn't experienced in years: safety. Not just physical safety, but the deep emotional security that comes from knowing you're worth protecting, worth defending, worth believing. The other customers began to clap, slowly at first, then building to genuine applause. Mrs. Patterson wiped her eyes and nodded approvingly. The young couple from the corner booth gave her encouraging smiles. If you've been enjoying this story, subscribe to our channel for more heartwarming tales. Gabriel turned to her as the police car disappeared into the night. Are you okay? Amelia realized she was crying, but for the first time in months, they were tears of relief, not fear. She had taken her life back, and it had started with trusting a stranger who turned out to be exactly the kind of person she deserved in her world. 6 months later, Amelia stood in her new apartment, not a studio this time, but a real one-bedroom with working air conditioning and windows that let in morning light. Her mom's medical bills were finally manageable, thanks to the better insurance. She'd also finished her nursing degree through night classes, something that felt impossible during those dark months with Jerome. Gabriel had helped, of course. Not by throwing money at her problems, but by believing she was capable of solving them herself. He'd connected her with resources, listened when she needed to talk, and celebrated every small victory along the way. Their relationship had grown slowly, built on friendship and mutual respect rather than desperation or need. "You ready for this?" Gabriel asked, adjusting his tie nervously. Today was the opening of Amelia's clinic, a small community health center in her old neighborhood, funded by Gabriel's foundation and staffed by people who understood that healthcare should be about dignity, not charity. "I think so," Amelia smiled, looking at the freshly painted sign that read, Hope Community Health Center, in cheerful blue letters. "Remember when you said I was the kind of person who faces whatever life throws at her with grace? I never believed you then. And now?" Gabriel's eyes were warm with pride and affection. "Now I think maybe grace isn't something you have," she said thoughtfully. "Maybe it's something you choose, every day, even when it's hard. Especially when it's hard." They walked through the clinic together, past the cheerful waiting room with its comfortable chairs and children's books, past the exam rooms equipped with state-of-the-art equipment that would serve this underserved community for years to come. This was what love looked like, Amelia had learned. Not grand gestures or dramatic declarations, but the quiet daily choice to lift each other up. Mrs. Patterson was their first patient, beaming with pride as Amelia checked her blood pressure. "I always knew you had something special, dear," the elderly woman said. "That night at the diner, when you found your courage, that was just the beginning, wasn't it?" Amelia nodded, thinking about how that terrifying moment had led to this beautiful one. Sometimes the scariest decisions turn out to be the most important ones we'll ever make. That evening, as they locked up the clinic, Gabriel took her hand. "Thank you," he said quietly. "For what?" "For trusting me that night. For showing me that real strength isn't about having power over someone. It's about using whatever power you have to protect and uplift others." He smiled. "You taught me that love multiplies when you give it away." As they walked together into the evening light, Amelia thought about the girl who used to work at Rosewood Diner, afraid of her own shadow, convinced she wasn't worth protecting. That girl had been braver than she knew, and her courage had led to a love story better than any fairy tale. One built on respect, trust, and the radical idea that everyone deserves to be treated with dignity. If you enjoyed this story, please remember to like, leave a comment with your thoughts, and subscribe for more heartwarming tales. Thank you for joining us on this journey of courage, love, and hope.